Okay, I'm going to go ahead and get started. My name is Jennifer Dill. I'm a faculty member in the School of Urban Studies and Planning, and along with Rob Bertini, one of my colleagues there, we help co-organize this seminar that we offer every Friday throughout the academic year, the 9-month year. And this is the second to last one this quarter. And I want to remind people who haven't been here before that we do webcast the seminar both live and it's archived. And so in order for people watching this on the web to hear your questions, if you do ask a question, we ask you to use this microphone that's sitting in front of most of the desks. You need to hold down on the touch button and keep the light on as you're asking your questions so everyone in the web land can hear you. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce our speaker today, Scott King, who's going to be talking about pedestrian and bicycle access to the airport, a somewhat unique topic. Truly multimodal, as one of my colleagues pointed out recently. Scott is a senior aviation planner for the Port of Portland with a focus on landside transportation planning to the Portland International Airport. He's worked on a number of projects there, including Airport Max, Airport Way widening, and some other projects. And prior to that, he was working for the Washington County Department of Land Use and Transportation. He's worked on a number of projects, long-range type planning projects there, including West Side Max. But I think most importantly, he's an alum of Portland State, at least the geography department, which we'll give him credit for that. So I'm going to turn.
So if I skip over something, slow me down, ask questions, all that. So I'll start with the background. First, I just wanted to orient people to the airport in case people don't have a sense of the geography out there. Right in here is the main terminal area, with right in the middle, that being the parking garage. Out here is Portland International Center, and that's the focus of a lot of the issues out here, and that's why I pointed out. Over here on the right is the I-205. The red across here is the Lombard, Killingsworth, Sandy, US 30, Columbia Boulevard, Marine Drive, and 33rd. And pretty much everything north of the slough here and between that big area is airport property. A little bit more further in, this focuses on Portland International Center, and it's divided into two sub-districts. There's Sub-District A, and that is the area that is called Cascade Station, the area that was leased to Bechtel for 99 years in return for money and construction of light rail, Airport Max. And Sub-District B is more of an industrially focused and airport use focused piece of land in PIC. And again, you can see where light rail is in the dashed yellow there. And this is just a further blow up of the area. I just wanted to point out in the green here you can see Airport Way and 82nd as the major two access roads into the airport. But importantly, this is South Cargo, Air Cargo Road. This is Frontage Road, Cascade Parkway. These are like frontage roads to Airport Way. And again, that becomes important later on. Yes?
How many acres or square miles are we talking about here, approximately?
For Portland International Center, about, I believe, 360 acres for Portland International Center. Cascade Station was about 120, 125, somewhere in there. And the airport is thousands of acres. So early on, and I'm kind of speaking from a national perspective and kind of my perspective a little bit here, but comprehensive planning for pedestrian and bicycle modes really haven't been a high priority in this country until recently. In the 80s, it became important for governments to to really have a comprehensive plan based on the need to do development exactions, to get funding for state and federal projects that had those elements. And I guess the one exception to that, there are notable localized demand areas. Eugene is really famous for early on really getting in, particularly into the bike mode. But really nationally, in the 80s is when people really started to pay some attention to it. But it's really the 90s and really 91 kind of a watershed year where at the federal level, ICE-T was adopted by Congress, and the Oregon Transportation Planning Rule came into effect. Those pretty much required you to do planning for pedestrian and bike. And so now everybody's doing it. And then I'd also say in this region, all the follow-on work to Region 2040, whether it's the Regional Transportation Plan, the Urban Growth Management Functional Plan, those elements get much more specific on the requirements. So really comprehensive planning in these modes is a newer phenomena. For airports, it's important to note that the airport is really part of a national and international transportation infrastructure situated in the middle of a local community. But a lot of the focus when you're at the airport is on these on national regulations, national issues. Not that we forget about the local. I mean, that's very important too. But there's much more of a focus on the large system than, for instance, my experience at Washington County, where it was pretty much limited to the county. And so, you know, regulators, whether it's the FAA, who are huge regulators, or the now TSA and the airlines have a real large impact on how we do business. Now, again, national issues, and I'm using this B&P here as a shorthand for bike and pedestrian, so I didn't take up so much space on the slides. But on the federal side, the FAA, even though the regulates all airport money, even when it's local money. So, for instance, we get a lot of money on parking. It's not federal money, it's the port's money. But federal regulations dictate how we can spend it. And generally, we can't spend a penny of it off the airport. I mean, that's not entirely true in every case. And we're limited in what we can spend it on. And in fact, FAA regulations and other sources of income that we have do not encourage development of alternative modes. To be able, we used passenger facility charges, which is something you pay for every time you get a ticket, to pay for our part of Airport Max. And it took over a year for my predecessor to work to be able to use our money. It's money we collect. It's not federal money, just to be able to use it on Airport Max. On a project I did on Airport Way widening, we were thinking about using similar funds, and the FAA, you can use them on the road, but you can't use them on any bike facilities or pedestrian facilities or even ITS infrastructure or anything like that. The road you can spend it on. So that's a big difference and an important thing to understand when you're working there. Also, the airlines, for a number of the improvements and expenditures at the airport, they have approval authority about how you spend your money. And it's important to note that the airline industry, over its whole history, is a money loser. You know, there's no profit at all in that industry over the whole length of time of the industry. And of course, they're doing very poorly now since the economy turned in 9/11. And for the areas they don't have approval authority, they have a very large influence, the airlines do, on airport expenditures to keep the airport costs down. So even though they don't have an absolute veto power, they do have a huge influence on that. And airlines are largely focused on getting the passengers in and getting them off in the air, and not issues like pedestrian and bike. Then, of course, local issues to face at the airport are all the state and local transportation plans and policies and requirements. And another issue for bike and pedestrian is our large size hinders circulation for these modes. These modes are clearly shorter means of connectivity are what you need for them as opposed to a car. And so there's really a need when the city or the region is looking at the whole system of, for instance, a bike system to want to use part of airport land to complete that system. But that is an issue. And I will say that for airports, when you talk to airports about this, that there's really a real low priority for bike and ped planning. Because it's been viewed at historically as being, travelers, it's too inconvenient for them to want to use those modes to access the airport. There's too much time, distance, and effort to get there. Just from the freeway to the terminal is 2 miles plus. And there's very limited demand, and so you spend a lot of money to put in that infrastructure for very little return, and that's kind of one of the reasons why it's largely not been looked at very well by airports. This table at the bottom could be misleading, but what I'm trying to point out here is that when airports invest money, all these things are priorities, by the way. I'm not saying that it's something down at the bottom of the table we don't really care about it. They're all priorities, but relative to each other, I've tried to rank them, and that when you're spending money at the airport, safety and security is first. It has evolved over the last decade or so into capacity and environmental and customer service issues kind of being equal. It depends on the issue, although it appears, I wasn't there, but just kind of looking at the history of it, that it may have been in that order of capacity, environmental, and customer service as far as the priorities. As far as the location where you spend money, airfield is always number one. The terminal is next in priority. On-airport land side is next, and off-airport is the lowest. And so when you're looking at pedestrian and bike connectivity, especially to the region and the regional network, you can kind of see that in both these areas, in both type and location, they tend to be at the lower end of the spectrum. In 2000, knowing that the airport was going to have to renew our conditional use permit with the city, and knowing that there were going to be bike and pedestrian requirements for the airport, just to kind of help me understand this national picture of airports and how they deal with it, I had a study done. I had one of our interns do it, one of the MERP students here at the time. We contacted the 50 largest passenger airports in North America with 37 responses, which was pretty good. Most of the major airports responded. The bottom, those are Atlanta and O'Hare, number 1 and number 2. They didn't respond, but virtually everybody responded on this survey. And I don't know that I want to read all this. Maybe you can look at it as we go along and read it. And these are abbreviated versions of the questions for this slide. But one thing to take away from this is, we're asking, are you required to do these elements? Do you have plans to do these elements as far as just the system plan or the capital plan to do these kinds of things? And you'll note the yes are pretty low numbers, and the only one that even approaches 50% is currently having pedestrian connections on an airport, and that would tend to make some sense. That's kind of within. But very few airports have much going on regarding this. I know of one airport where, except if you're packing it for shipping it on an airplane, it's illegal to ride a bike on the airport property. So, you want to spend any more time with this table? Yeah, go ahead.
I have a quick question. Off airport, would that refer to hotels or other services nearby?
Well, I'm thinking off the airport grounds. So on our, there's 3 hotels on PDX property right now with the Embassy Suites, Sheraton, and the Hampton. So that would be in the on-airport for us. So I'll go a little bit into the evolution of the plan. And really, in the 90s, we got increasing demand from airport employees for these connections, both pedestrian and bike. There's about 10,000 people who work at the airport, so that's a lot of folks. There's a pedestrian need, particularly if you're familiar with the airport, to want to get from the terminal to the post office, which is on the other side of the MAX tracks. And pretty healthy demand by airport employees that would like to bike to work. It's really pretty amazing when you start looking around with some of the airlines and their tenant spaces in the airport, and you'll see people having bikes locked up in a corner over here or sitting in a room. But we really don't have the facilities to get there, so it's really the people are really confident in their ability to drive on Airport Way, which is pretty high speed and high volume, without facilities to get there. But there is a lot of demand. Also, the port has commitment to multimodal transportation planning. I mean, that came in the 90s with everything else. The port did an alternative mode strategy for PDX to try to get as many people in a non-auto mode, whether it's a commercial vehicle or a multi-party vehicle. It helps delay the need for additional infrastructure, which is very expensive. We knew we had these city conditional use requirements coming up that would require us to do something. And we had these projects coming up with Airport Max and Cascade Station and the widening of Airport Way we did, Mount Hood Interchange, which is there by the economy lot if you go to the airport. And when we're building all this stuff, we kind of needed to know where the facilities were going to be. So that's kind of the need. I wanted to throw this in. This is kind of right out of the transportation planning rule and a real key element of the transportation planning rule regarding pedestrian and bike access. And the key phrase is safe and convenient pedestrian and bicycle circulation. And what I tried to do, and these aren't, not that what I did in the blue is all convenience and not safety and vice versa, but the way it's written, it acknowledges that there may be inappropriate places to put facilities that they're not safe. On the other hand, you need to have direct routes when they're reasonable. And that is kind of the mindset going into what we were doing comes out of this. Even though it's not actually the TPR, is not a requirement on the port. So really the first real effort, planning effort to start doing that, start putting in pedestrian and bike facilities on plans was the Cascade Station PIC Plan District that was done in conjunction with Airport Max and make that whole Portland International Center a plan district. And just briefly so you can see what is allowed in that area, that sub-district A, that 120 acres, has the 2 light rail stations and is mostly office, as you can see, lots of hotel, allows a good-sized cinema. Sub-district B is mostly industrial, and 100 acres of aviation uses, of which we have our employee parking lot out there now. But notice there's no residential. That's not allowed at all. So it's mixed use out there, but not with residential. This is just an artist rendering of Cascade Station about what it could look like under the current plan if built out. And again, this is looking from the west to the east. Again, it was a city process to do Cascade Station. It was their legislative plan amendment. It was their public involvement process. The requirements for bike and pedestrian facilities were largely determined by city staff through that process, not the port. We were just a stakeholder in that process. And as far as we know, there was no serious opposition to what ended up being adopted. It was never, again, the city did it. I've never heard from anybody at the city that that plan district had any serious opposition on those elements. What they were trying to do out there, of course, was have light rail station connectivity, have just internal development connectivity, and try to get connections to the surrounding regional facilities. There's an I-205 bike lane. There's a Marine Drive. Of course, that's not for Cascade Station, but there are regional facilities out there and try to get connections for them. Other than that, they had bike lanes and sidewalks on all the public streets in Cascade Station. They have a number of small block private streets that are required that would all have sidewalks. They added a couple of mixed-use trails, but did not put in any facilities along the frontage of Airport Way itself. This starts to become a theme here about what goes on Airport Way. I just wanted to show you here on the left is the original page from the plan district that shows the facilities. And I guess, so all these dark lines are all the public streets. This right here is one of the connection pieces for an off-street trail. There's another one here that's built now. And then there was one from here over across the freeway ramp up to Airport Way by the I-205 interchange. That was what was originally adopted, and that was in February of '99. So a year and a half later, there were some amendments because Cascade Station actually had some developers who had a very specific plan they wanted to do, and the plan district needed to be amended. During that time, the city took out this here. You notice it's not here anymore, and there's actually text in the plan that said we did it because it's not safe. That's a high speed, it's not a signalized on-ramp. It's a high speed, almost freeway to freeway kind of movement. And it's a two-lane movement too. So they took it out. The next, and maybe the big key element to what we ended up with our plan, is the airport commissioned an East Airport area bicycle and pedestrian study. And we had Browning Shono Architects from Northwest Portland. They were the prime consultant on it. And you can read the goal. And the objectives of the study, again, identify gaps, map the routes. Well, you can read it. The key study stakeholders in this were ODOT, Metro, PDOT, Willamette Pedestrian Coalition, Bicycle Transportation Alliance, and Columbia Corridor Association. I have those two asterisks there because this came into play later on. PDOT staffs a person as an expert in each one of those modes. There's a city bike coordinator and a pedestrian coordinator. But when we did this study, the pedestrian coordinator position was vacant. They didn't have anybody. And so we didn't have a city staff pedestrian person in this study. And while we have Willamette Pedestrian Coalition as a stakeholder, for whatever reason, they weren't able to make any of the meetings. So what we ended up with was a plan that was underrepresented by the pedestrian element. Now, both ODOT and Metro reps have those elements in their focus. So it's not that we didn't have any representation there, but it was underrepresented, and that became a problem later on. We can talk about that. Ranking criteria in this study had to do with, again, the mode benefit, how many modes are benefited, user benefit, how does it serve local destinations, connections, the general performance, which includes safety and convenience, back to those key phrases, and how would it potentially degrade the traffic performance. The priority destinations to try to focus the facilities on were, of course, the terminal building, Portland International Center again with the LRT stations, Frontage Road. And Frontage Road is on the north side of Airport Way. It's where the Sheraton is and Delta Cargo. You may have seen those if you drive through there. And then connections to the regional system for the focus. This slide is a little out of date because this was done from a study we had pre-9/11, and since then our absolute numbers are down and our growth rates are slower. But we are looking for Airport Way, and this might end up being 2025 or 2027, who knows by the time we get there, of having up to 100,000 vehicles a day on Airport Way. Currently, for non-freeways in Oregon, I believe the highest daily volume that you're going to find is right around 62,000 vehicles a day, and that might be like a McLaughlin Boulevard or a TV highway, that kind of thing. And Airport Way actually was at 60,000 in 2000. We're less than that now because of the decrease. The only facilities that you're going to see with 6-digit daily volume numbers are freeways. And in fact, up until recently, there were major links of the freeway system within the urban area that had under 100,000 a day on them, kind of at the outlying edges. So that's a real healthy volume of traffic and high speed. And 82nd, as you can see, the lesser road is still going to be one of the busiest roads in the region, surface roads in the region. There was a question? Yeah.
Do you know what level of service those 2020 numbers might represent? Are those failing or E?
Well, on airport, we try to plan for level service D. That's our goal. These are just, again, I'm getting back to Airport Way and the kind of facility it is, because it's a big reason why we ended up with what we have. This is the intersection of 82nd and Airport Way. So the Embassy Suites Hotel is right here currently, and the at-grade light rail crossing right here. But what this shows, maybe not real well, is an overpass over Airport Way. So we're going to have an interchange with long on-ramps and off-ramps and everything. You don't see that on surface arterials. To the east, we need to put in braided ramps in the future. Our interchange, the Mount Hood Avenue interchange here, is too close to I-205, and so then there's a traffic weave, and I don't know if you know what a weave is, but people coming one way, they want to get this way, and other people in the same lanes want to get that way. When it becomes bad enough, that area breaks down, so we need to do these braided ramps so that those movements are separated. They never meet. So again, we're looking at interchanges and braided ramps and everything. Yeah.
On your last slide, on the left side of the slide, there's something that says future taxiway crossing. Is
Right.
that going to be a new runway or taxiway that goes over Airport Way?
Right. What we have in our airport master plan right now, and this is for airfield capacity issues, is that eventually connecting our existing north and south runways with a taxiway over here, so they all don't have to go to the west, and you can get airplane congestion, that way. So yeah, the road will have to go under the taxiways. Yeah.
Any idea when these are estimated to be put in?
The taxiways?
The interchanges.
Well, the one interchange, this is in. The braided ramps here, again, we haven't done, we're kind of in the middle of some studies right now. We haven't updated them since everything changed in 2001, but my guess is these are around 2018, 2020, somewhere in there is that need. Oops. And this probably around 2015 would be the need. And so, again, I'm trying to describe what Airport Way is going to be like in the future. As you can see, it's interchanges and ramps, and actually I have kind of a thing here that I've probably made my point, but it's kind of neat. We had a simulation done of what Airport Way could look like with these facilities in it. We did it for our landscaping program, but it does show if this thing will work. Maybe it won't work. Well, this is too bad. Worked at my desk. Well, I'm sorry. Okay. Well, I'll just move on. You got the point. Oops, now it doesn't want to go anywhere. Okay. Well, yeah. I'm trying to remember where I was. Let's see. I'd hate to stop here. But I do have overheads. There we go. Okay, so when the study was done, we had three primary conclusions to the study, and that for Airport Way and Frontage Road, use the parallel facilities for bikes and pedestrians with pathway connections or non-road facilities at the east and west ends. And that's because of the freeway-like Airport Way, the interchanges of braided ramps, and the fact that the land uses that we have along the corridor don't front or have any access to Airport Way. Their frontage and access is to the frontage roads. Air Cargo Way, that south side frontage road, same thing. And provide a terminal connection when light rail is realigned in the future at the terminal. And I'll show you that in a little bit. Right now, if you tried to get from the south cargo area to the terminal, you'd have to cross light rail, and there's no engineered or built pedestrian crossing doing that. So that's not feasible at this time. And for 82nd Avenue, provide a safe crossing of Airport Way at 82nd, very high volume intersection, and in fact that is done. And provide a mixed use facility between Air Cargo Way or Air Cargo Road and Airport Way. And that too is built and done. This is just a map of the study. If you can see I don't know how well it shows up here, but there's lots of different lines, for instance, along Airport Way about how you might make that connection. So there's proposed trails, proposed bikeways, proposed sidewalks. All those things were evaluated under the evaluation criteria to see how we were going to end up with those modes. You okay with this? You want to look at this anymore? Or? Okay. Next is the city transportation system plan. Again, the city had to adopt a TSP under the transportation planning rule. They're doing a whole citywide comprehensive plan for that. It includes the airport. Port's just a stakeholder in that process. And a number of the different modal maps for the different regions of the city were changing over time in the drafts. And what ended up toward the end of the process, real close to the final planning commission hearing on it, we recognized that it wasn't consistent with the study that we had that the city helped on. And so it was not reflected on the maps, what we did and what the city agreed to in the prior study. And the TSP was also inconsistent with that amendment in the Cascade Station Plan District where they took that one connection off that I showed you. And again, it wasn't caught till late in the process. And so instead of trying to change the maps and all that, city and the port agreed to some wording. There, I have it circled there. That basically, knowing that we had our conditional use coming up, and one of the things that both the city and the airport want to do is not have the airport be a conditional use, have it either have its own plan district or a zone. So we've already have agreements between us that we're going to move to do that. And so that through one of those two different vehicles, we could adopt our bike and pedestrian plan and have it supersede what was in the TSP. And that's kind of the agreement that we had. So then we get to the conditional use, and again, we had this underrepresented pedestrian element in our plan, and city staff was concerned about that, and so what they wanted us to do was enter into a process with the City Pedestrian Advisory Committee to go through the pedestrian elements of that and try to get some consensus on that and put that into our application for our conditional use permit. So our conditional use permit was quasi-judicial, a type 3 process in the city, and it was only went to the year 2011 for a use. For the uses, we had 37 development projects approved in that. It was an excellent vehicle to get the bike and ped plan that we have adopted. And that happened, and the final city approval was in July of 2003. So we now have a new conditional use permit, and that included a look at our plan. I guess I said that. So we went through met with the PAC, and it included presentations and discussions at 2 of their regular meetings, and both of them pretty much were the whole meeting. Not entirely, but the lion's share of the meeting. We had an on-site visit one weekend where people walked around, lots of emails and phone calls going back and forth. There certainly were disagreements, and I would say the main disagreement was the need to have pedestrian connection across that southbound on-ramp and up to Airport Way to get to the east side of Airport Way. Again, that gets to be off airport property at that point, but it got taken off for a safety reason. The other thing is that a lot of folks on the PAC wanted sidewalks to be right along Airport Way, at least on one side. Again, we were thinking because of all the freeway-like nature of it in the future, that wasn't necessarily the best place to put it, and really the demand would be down in Cascade Station with its commercial and hotel and office uses. That's where the pedestrian generators would be. So the results were, we did come to agreement, and we made changes on a number of issues, some policy issues. We added actually to our plan to put on these south side facilities on Air Cargo Road to the terminal. Before, the previous plan just said, look at it when you realign light rail in the future. And we just said, now we're just going to put it right on the map instead of, for that time, instead of just saying it's out there in the future. And in the end, it was a good process that resulted in a much better plan, I think.
You haven't mentioned it explicitly, but I assume that you had to follow American Disabilities Act requirements. So did that come into
that?
Or maybe
yes, but that generally doesn't come to play in a systems planning exercise. When you build things, you have to meet ADA. I think maybe to a minor degree, I think maybe I brought it up once. One of the issues was if you brought the pedestrian facilities right along the south side of Airport Way, then to get up to the overpass where there's facilities to meet the grade requirements, the maximum or grade requirements under ADA, you'd have to turn around and go a long way the other way and back. And so you end up not having a shorter distance than if you just went into the area and came up to where the development was. And also, I just wanted to show, this is not exactly, but kind of what the airport is like now. Of course, the canopy's not on there. But this is the way the road system works, where this heads way to the south and comes out around and curves way back and heads out from the terminal. In the future, and when I talk about light rail realignment and other things, we have an airport that ends up looking something like this. And again, the road was out here and going. And so we end up having a terminal area that accommodates maybe even more than double the amount of passengers we have now with less area. And again, these were just placeholders, but again, pedestrian connections to the sides between the garages so people don't have to walk a long way around. That's certainly our goal, and that's one of the policies that we put in our plan that came out of the PAC process. Of course, one of the issues now is with all the heightened security measures, how do you pull that off in the limited space? But that's certainly something we're committed to do. It's just good customer service. So we're going through, we just finished with the PAC process. We're actually, I think, in our appeal period on our conditional use permit. And we meet with the FAA occasionally and update them on what's going on. All of a sudden they realized that we had all these planned bike and pedestrian facilities on the airport. And they go, wait a minute. If they're not for airport users, you can't have them on there. So we want you to certify that all these links for these modes are predominantly for airport users. But again, all of PIC, even Cascade Station, is on airport, so they would count as a airport trip end on that. So actually using some numbers from Metro's travel forecasting about average trip lengths for trip types for bikes, and they actually have those numbers, and then applying it on the ground to this large airport, I was actually able to make the case that they should be predominantly used or have an airport trip end somewhere on there, even though some of them clearly will have a lot of non-airport users on them. Yeah.
Do airport users include the employees?
Oh, yeah, yeah. Any trip end on the airport would count. But again, FAA is not it's not their cup of tea, I guess. What?
I'm just, no, if I'm jumping ahead if you're going to get to it, but what about bike parking? Because you talked about one of the big demands creators are employees, and
Right.
quite often with employee parking you're able to kind of do it off to the side for long term. But if you wanted to go meet your friend who was coming in at the airport and take the Max back,
Right.
but you did bike and Max, is there bike parking for short
Yeah, at the
term?
terminal we have, at the lower level, we have one of those loop racks, I think, for 8 to 10 bikes on the north end, and we have 2 of those on the south end by Max. In the summer, those ones, especially by Max, get really full. The north one doesn't get used a whole lot. I have a project right now that just has opened up to build the bicycle facilities in from Frontage Road into the terminal with bike storage in there. So, and where we will do that is underneath where the upper roadway takes off. As you approach the terminal, we have a nice covered area under there where you could park some bikes. So I'll show you the plan itself now. So the final plan is a consolidation of the East Airport area study that we did, the Cascade Station PIC work from the city, our conditional use process that we did, just general city development requirements that allow improvements on or require improvements on public road frontages. And then just a port staff identified needs to pull it all together and have some policies and make it, a workable plan. So it's a consolidation of all that. So we developed a couple of policies. One is a planning policy, and it's as you can read, it's our policy to plan for both those modes as alternative access modes to the airport. And strategies include participating with Metro in the RTP and the city in their TSP. Of course, making sure that we're okay with the FAA, and participating in any future review of that troublesome south on-ramp that has been a major issue. For facilities, that we're going to build safe and convenient facilities when we do it. And that provide reasonably direct and internal and external connections. We're going to use city and state standards whenever we can. We're going to avoid facilities right along Airport Way and use the parallel corridors. And only put the pedestrian facilities on the side of the frontage roads where the development is. Use it as a design consideration and what T is terminal expansion east, and that was what I showed you in that picture where the road moved north. Use it as a design consideration, and in fact we just had a kind of a design charrette for that last week where all this came into play, trying to accommodate or have the space to allow these connections. Include safe and convenient facilities in the future Airport Way 82nd interchange. That's going to be probably a little tricky. We still have a light rail crossing there. It'll be separated from the road then. Vertical issues, train issues, but that's going to be a design element when we get there. And then require airport tenants whenever we have the opportunity, when they develop, to put in adjacent bike and pedestrian facilities. Our funding sources, again, we have what we call a port cost center, and that's airport-generated money. It's largely parking money, and our share of the money from rental cars. As I noted, then developers try to get one of our tenants to put it in whenever that's appropriate. And there's some limited ability to use passenger facility charges in conjunction with other projects to get some of these facilities in. So for instance, if we were able to use PFCs for this terminal expansion east, as part of that in that area, we may be able to use those to actually put in the bike parking or the end-of-trip facilities there and some of the terminal area connections. We have an element for implementation of the plan and, importantly, plan amendments, how we're going to do that. And again, we're not required under Oregon law to, we're not a land use agency, so we don't have to give the land use notice for these kinds of things. We have our own internal public involvement process. So we'll use that to do amendments, and in conjunction with the city TSP, make sure that we're consistent with that. So these are the 5 maps we ended up doing, and actually I'd like to thank Heather here, who's our current intern. She made these at the airport. So this is the bicycle plan for the greater airport area. And this is a blow-up of the terminal area. And then pedestrian plan, equivalent blow-up of the area. And then this talks about how we anticipate these projects coming off, whether we have a standalone project, capital project to build these facilities, whether it's part of some other project like a terminal expansion east, a developer, whatever. And these are just how we anticipate them being built so that when airport people look at this, they can kind of get a sense of, there's no requirement here, but how we anticipate getting those funded. So, after it's all said and done, I guess the biggest thing I learned is special district planning, if you will, like we are, is a whole lot different than the traditional state, city, county type planning. You're more like an applicant than you are a master of your own destiny, like you are as a city or a county would be. Doing it all over again, I think we would be much more forceful in obtaining interest group participation early in our planning process and not just say to the city, well, you don't have somebody, so we'll just go ahead, or when the Willamette pedestrian person wasn't showing up, saying we'll get somebody else who can. We'd be much more forceful in that. We'd also be much more forceful after we had of reminding the city that we had this plan that was agreed to before they did their TSP, so we didn't run into that problem when they did their TSP. And it's a tough balance between FAA limitations and all the kind of the local expectations about trying to pull these things off and pay for them. But overall, a lot of people learned a lot of things, and so it's been a good process, and we think we have a pretty good plan. So that's what I have. Yep.
I actually have 2 questions. The first one, I wonder, when you did your initial survey of other airports that have integrated bicycle and pedestrian facilities, did you get any interest back saying, when you figure out what you've done, let us know? Because we need to
yeah, a couple of airports. Seattle was interested. Dallas-Fort Worth, interesting, was interested. But those are the only people that I actually sent it out to.
And the other one is about the Metro Transportation Demand Management requirements. The airport is such a large employer. Were you able to couple some of these facilities with any of the TDM requirements, or are you not under the Metro TDM?
Well, yes, but the port has a couple hundred employees out there. So we're actually one of the smaller employers out there with the airlines, and everybody else has their own requirement. But certainly, as an alternative mode, and in our TDM plan that we've done, getting these facilities in and end-of-trip facilities in are a priority for us. Yeah. Yeah. Back over here.
I know you've been talking about bicycles and pedestrians, but at the same time, in looking at your plans for terminal realignment, is there any thoughts at all for personal transportation systems integrating the whole mess, the people mover, that kind of a system, the automated transportation systems?
To date, what we've been looking at, and this is maybe a different presentation, what we have in our master plan as we grow would be another terminal location. And so that's where we would have like an underground people mover system between terminals. That's in the plan. But in our large terminal area that we have now, as we build it out, right now that's not an element. Potentially it could be when we get there to look at it. Yeah.
The only reason I was asking, I was thinking of the integration with the pedestrian bicycle, where you can actually not have to bring them right into the terminal in some cases, but be working with that system further out as an integrated operation.
Yeah. We have no specific plans for that right now.
You mentioned that in some airports it's actually illegal to ride your bike,
That's what we heard when we did the survey, yeah.
but you don't know why?
My guess is because, and again, I don't know this, is because the alternative nodes are not encouraged by the FAA, that you don't get the money to build facilities, and it maybe for a liability purpose or something like that, we don't have the facilities on there, so we don't want to have the liability of you riding on substandard or just in a travel lane, a busy travel lane. That's my guess, but I don't know.
I might be able to answer part of that question for you from Chicago, because I'm very familiar with the airport. There is physically no way to be a pedestrian or a bicycle to get into O'Hare Airport from the outside, literally. I mean, it just, nothing exists except the roadways, and there are far too many vehicles to even think about a bicycle. Plus, I suspect that you would not be allowed to ride the bike once you got into the airport property. Just my guess, knowing how Chicago works things.
Doesn't surprise me. Sorry.
Did you estimate the number of bicyclists and pedestrians, who would be using this when fully implemented? Did you do a comparison between current use, which is none basically, except from on the other side of the levee, people riding their bikes, and then when you have this plan fully implemented?
We don't have hard numbers. We know there's demand out there, and enough that we want to put them in. And of course, the airport's big enough. There's different trips being accommodated. So, for instance, the stuff in Portland International Center might have quite a bit of use out there. To the terminal itself, again, we don't have hard and fast numbers. We know that what we have now, for the people who are brave enough to use the system we have now, that people are finding places to put their bikes and finding their way in.
I'm not too familiar with the overcrossing that's just west of I-205, but is that feasible for a crossing, or are there bike and ped facilities
There's
to get over
actually
airport
a
way?
shared bike and ped path on the east side of that facility going down into the roundabout on the north side. Yep.
I just actually have two questions. The first is you mentioned that in Cascade Station and that area, you're going to require new facilities to include sidewalks and bike lanes. Does that include the more industrial portion as well as the Cascade Station? And then second of all, I just want to make it clear, so there is in the plan no connection to the east side of 205. You just will have to go all the way to Marine Drive or all the way around Rocky Butte. And on that note, you said in your lessons learned some of the things you could have done.
Yeah.
Did you ever consider that maybe when they were building the Airport Max, they should have incorporated a bike lane bridge over the top of 205 along with the Airport Max bridges?
Wow. First of all, the connections to the east. In PIC, there's Alderwood Road, which is kind of in the south, north of the slough, but in the south half of it. And it actually connects to a road called Clark Road that goes underneath the freeway and connects to the I-205 trail. And then we would have a connection out by the interchange that goes north to the Marine Drive trail and takes off from there. Those are the connections that we have planned. as far as the last question, Airport Max construction really wasn't anywhere near the Airport Way interchange. And in fact, that was a very fast, it was an idea, let's get it going, tight money thing. So that never would have happened there. And what was your third question, or actually your first one?
I guess, was just to clarify that there's going to be bicycle
Just to clarify, PIC, right.
Yeah, bicycle lanes and sidewalks in the industrial area as well as
right. Actually, for all the public streets, and there's only one link of about, I think, 900 feet or so that isn't built yet of all the public streets. The bike lanes are in one stretch. They're all city roads, by the way. There's one older stretch of Cascade Parkway that they don't have it striped, but next time they go out there, they need to stripe it. But Alderwood has bike lanes on it, and Cascade Parkway in Subdistrict A has bike lanes on it. The north-south connector road between the two has bike lanes on it. And then sidewalks for all of those. It's the private roads that get built for the kind of internal circulation and the kind of the short block system that's currently in the plan district that require the additional sidewalks on them. Yeah.
Said that the FAA has control of all the revenues that the port generates and then it spends it. Am I correct?
Right. They have regulations that limit how we can spend our money. Right.
Okay. How did they prioritize, spending the money on these projects at the airport? And then also, how did water quality features kind of ranked within this prioritization in terms of de-icing and impact on the slope?
Well, again, that was an environmental issue and associated with the airfield. De-icing is an airfield event. So that real de-icing, as far as I know, really wasn't a problem with the FAA on funding. And I'm sorry, the first part was what? I'm sorry.
I guess I was just seeing to see where the water quality was ranked.
Again, that's an environmental issue. It's certainly a higher priority than off-airport issues. They are very concerned that we meet all the environmental regulations whenever we do our work. So actually, that's a reasonably high priority for them. He was first back here.
The purpose of the bike and ped facility is mainly for commuters or also for recreation purposes. And if it's only for the commuters, is the economy is only for the employee of the airport?
Well, it's for any user. I mean, I don't know that many passengers are going to use them. So it's going to probably be mostly employees or recreational users that use the facilities. Yeah, you were next. Go ahead.
Did you make any forecast of the traffic volume of pedestrians and bikers that would probably use the facilities when the plan will be implemented?
No.
No. Okay.
No. We knew we had to build the connection. And so where we thought it was appropriate to build them, whether it's, only 2 people a day in certain areas and the outliers or not, that's where we're just going to put them. Yeah.
Whether it's going to be heavily used or not.
Well, we need to connect the activity areas, is what it is. So, maybe most of the activity would be in the activity area, but there is, for instance, I gave the example before of the post office, which is near but a ways from the terminal. There is some limited demand for people, especially employees on their lunch hour, don't want to walk over to the post office. We may only get 5 people a day when we end up building that, but we do need to make that connection. Okay.
Speaking of recreational use, I was wondering if that bike path along the slough that kind of just dead ends, is that going to be extended?
Yeah, that's part of the broader kind of regional trail system. On the plans, it's going to be extended. I know there's some real issues about how that's going to get pulled off.
It's a really nice path, but it just kind of takes you nowhere.
Right. Well, it's, they started planning for these systems, and obviously there's breaks in the system right now. And a lot of environmental issues are the reason why, especially along the slough, about what you're going to do there and how you do it. Is that it?
Well, actually, I just had a comment related to the issue of non-airport users going on these trails. It seems as if you could make an argument for people who might go on there just for the recreational use. They might actually become customers of the airport because the airport has nice shopping, and I'm sure Cascade Station is going to have a lot of attractive features. So just thought of that. You can use that in your arguments. It's like, well, yeah, we might attract some non-airport users, but maybe they won't spend some money on the airport while they're there.
That's true. I didn't. That's kind of that pass-by trip thing. I didn't make that argument. But you're right. I mean, there is potential there depending on what ends up getting built in Cascade Station. Yeah.
Do you know why the FAA doesn't consider alternative modes to be a priority?
Not for sure. I think it all gets down to money, and there's limited money, and the focus is on airplanes. Ultimately, But no, I've never had anybody come out and say exactly why. So, okay. Oh,
sorry. Just real quick. You mentioned that 10,000 people work at the airport, I think, and so just to get an idea of what kinds of, and since that would be the majority of the people biking in, do you have any idea how many trips are coming in of just airport customers every day?
Of any kind of trips?
Yeah. How many people are coming to, basically I'm wondering how many people are coming to the airport to travel or pick someone up or drop someone off versus how many employees are coming in every day?
I think we average somewhere between 30 and 35,000 passengers a day. And the drop-off pickup might be, I'm trying to remember this, somewhere between 15 and 20% of that number. So I think it's in there.
Okay, I think we will thank our speaker in just a second, but I want to remind everyone that next week, Brian Greger from ODOT will be talking about the economics of congestion, so I hope to see you all there, and let's thank Scott King for his great presentation.